When aliens realized Earth's history is a closed time loop, Dr. Zara Kelman cupped her hands to the cold observation deck glass, looking downward into the darkness where the blue marble of Earth drifted. Earth, after 18 months aboard the research vessel Meridian, continued to leave her short of breath. But today, nothing felt quite right. Data streams whizzing through her neural interface set up a situation which defied everything she had ever studied about human society. "Commander Thane, you have to see this," she called out across the cold white laboratory. Her tone had a sharpness to it, causing the other scientists to glance up from their holographic screens. Commander Elliot Thane, a hardened man who silvered hair belied decades among the stars, paced with the measured caution of one who understood speed meant blunders. The Meridian was humanity's most advanced deep space research vessel, but perilous mission as well. They were the very first human mission to cooperate with the Corvani, an ancient alien species who had been observing Earth for thousands of years. "What have you learned, Dr. Kelman?" Thane asked, his voice rock solid, but Zara could sense the tension in his shoulders. For weeks now, the Corvani warriors had been acting strangely, their usual stoicism exchanged for an expression of near fear. Zara gestured to the massive holographic screen which dominated the center of the lab. "I have been tracing the patterns of temporal resonance throughout Earth's history. All the big strides of evolution, all the big advancements, all the crossroads of humanity's progress." She breathed deeply, her fingers tremoring slightly as she manipulated the flows of data. "Commander, they're all interconnected, not only impacted by one another, but caused by their own effects." The hologram shifted, depicting an elaborate weave of cross-cutting timelines. Red and blue threads blended with one another, with patterns that turned back on themselves over and over. Quantum physicist Dr. Marcus Chen had gotten up from his own work and stepped forward. His face, normally a calm one, had gone pale. "That is not possible," Chen gasped. "You are claiming that human history is a closed causal loop. No speculation." "Proving." Zara gestured with her fingers, and the screen zoomed in on individual data points. The Renaissance wasn't brought on by rediscovered classical texts. It was brought on by time travelers from the Renaissance itself, going back to plant those texts. The Industrial Revolution wasn't brought on by ingenuity. Future industrialists had gone back to inspire their own ancestors. Whatever breakthrough, moment of inspiration, moment of advancement was caused by its own future. Commander Thane felt an icy feeling in his stomach. "More, please." The hologram flickered, and a history of human evolution appeared. The evolution of language, agriculture, mathematics, space travel, everything. Humans from the future, returning to ensure their own past comes to pass exactly as it did. The loop is closed, seamless, self-contained. Team xenobiologist Dr. Sarah Winters stopped examining Corvani genetic material. But then there would have never been an original timeline. No beginning to the loop. Yes, human civilization did not have a beginning. It merely is, always will be. We did not come from natural evolution and progress. We are the product of our own futures, looking back and changing our pasts. The lab fell silent, except for the hum of the ship in the background. All members of the team grappled with the implication. If this were the case, then their free will did not exist, and all decisions had been preordained beforehand as a consequence of their own future decisions. Commander Thane activated his communications. "Implant Corvani Council, Commander Thane. We need to talk to you now." The response came immediately, but not from their standard Corvani liaison. Instead, their main screen on their vessel illuminated, and before them stood three of the tall, alien-looking beings with crystal skin and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of experience. These were not the young academics with whom they had negotiated previously. These were members of the High Council. A human commander stated the central one, and its words had an echoing on harmonic frequencies. "You have found what we have long known, what we have long feared." Zara stepped forward, You knew about the loops. How long have you known? The Corvani to the left, their crystalline features gleaming with an otherworldly light, seem to have sighed. We have observed your species for 12,000 of your years. We have witnessed the same things occurring, repeatedly, exactly as they have always occurred. The same wars, the same discoveries, the same creatures making the same choices at the same times. Why didn't you say anything? Chen asked. Because, said the third Corvani, we've been attempting to get out of the loop. The words dangled like a death sentence. Commander Thane's training kicked in, survival instincts honed. On dangerous missions for years. What do you mean, break the loop? The Corvani Center's form sparkled, and then the lab flooded with visions of Earth's history. But these were not the serene historical times from history texts. These were visions of intervention, Corvani ships. Hardly visible, molding key events within human evolution. We hoped, said the Corvani, by precluding some key events, we might create an alternate chronology. One where your species would have developed on their own initiative, not under the false imperatives of the temporal loop. Zara stared aghast, as images demonstrated Corvani technology to have silently altered the course of human evolution. Deflecting asteroid trajectories, injecting beneficial mutations, eliminating threat that would have exterminated prehistoric human societies. You've been helping us, I said to her, with an expression of rising understanding. For millennia, you've been looking out for our survival and advancement. Yes, one of the original Corvani said. And we only now discover why the work had failed. The holographic display changed, displaying a new set of temporal patterns. They were not like the human loops Zara had discovered. They were older, deeper, more fundamental to the very fabric of reality itself. Dr. Winter's eyes grew wide. Your interventions are within the loop. M. Horizon, the Corvani Center said, with the gravitas of immortal grief. Our machinations are. The loop, everything we have ever done to coax humanity to evolve, all the subtle prodding we have provided. All the threats we have eliminated were comprised of your species' loop prior. We have not been trying to interfere with your loop. We have been fulfilling it. The aftershocks hit the human researchers like a tidal wave. Marcus Chen sat down on a chair, his face pale. You're saying you believe if you hadn't intervened, humans would never have evolved? That's right. Seeking to free your species from temporal bondage, we discovered we are the very wellspring of your existence. Your ancestors would have been exterminated by the asteroid we diverted. The favorable mutations we introduced offered the psychic leaps to the dawn of consciousness. Your calamities we thwarted for your civilizations were the roots of your greatest achievements. Zara felt the world whirl on around her. So you stop messing around. Humanity goes extinct, not only in the future, but looking back. Your entire species, your history, your achievements, everything depends on our continued intervention. Commander Thane failed to grasp the scope of what they were being informed. But you said you were trying to disrupt our loop? You created us? So what? Were you actually trying to do? The three Corvani stared at each other as if they had said much. After some time, the middle one spoke again. We came to erase you. The words landed like body blows. Sarah Winters got up slowly, scientific detachment struggling with a very human pain. You were committing genocide. We believed, said the left Corvani. Your species' loops of time are a built-in danger to the stability of reality itself. Your future selves continued meddling with the past produces ripples far beyond Earth. Other species, other civilizations, other galaxies now are showing signs of temporal contamination. Contamination. Chen's voice sliced with anger. Civilizations which should not be, are. Technologies moving millions of years too fast. Species which should have evolved normally showing traits of man-made evolution. Your loops are spreading. Zara walked to the screen, fingers manipulating the temporal data with growing intensity. Contamination patterns, she stated. The hologram expanded. Not only to display Earth's chronology, but to expand elaborate patterns of mutually related galactic societies running throughout the natural history of untold species were the telling signs of temporal interference. "Oh, God," she panted. "It's not just spreading, it's picking up speed. As human society becomes more advanced, as our future selves are better able to carry out larger and more complicated temporal interventions." "Yes," confirmed the right Corvani. "In your far future, human beings will have to learn to manipulate time on a cosmic scale. They will travel back not merely to mold Earth's evolution, but to redefine complete galactic clusters. Even the very natural flow of evolution and development will come to be completely synthetic." Commander Thane tried to remain calm, but the responsibility seemed like an unbearable weight. "So you decided to halt human evolution entirely. Seemed to be the only solution. Surgery at the beginning of your evolution, to prevent the preliminary conditions which would inevitably create temporal manipulation technology. But your timely intervention to stop us actually caused us to exist initially," said Sarah. "Yes, we are stuck within our own loop now. We do what we can to prevent humanity from constructing time technology, which we must do to grow humanity, which compels humanity to construct time technology, which jeopardizes the galaxy, which causes us to do what we can to prevent humanity from constructing time technology." The cycle of viciousness was too much to deal with. Zara could not but laugh, the tone laced with hysteria. "Humans are stuck in our man-made cycle of history, and you are stuck within your cycle of trying to stop us. It is far more serious than you believe," stated the Center Corvani. "Our latest analysis confirms that temporal contamination is not limited to this galaxy. We have detected similar signs on distant galaxy clusters. Loops are going universal." Marcus Chen looked up from his equations. "Universal, you mean?" "Are saying that if this goes on, causality itself may break down. The distinction between cause and effect, between past and future, may vanish. Reality may become one eternal, unchanging moment in which all possibilities are present simultaneously." The lab fell quiet with astonishment. All of the humans struggled with comprehension of the scale of the disaster they had innocently caused. Not only the death of humanity, but the death of time itself. "There is a solution," declared Commander Thane finally. "Some way to get out of the cycle and not annihilate humanity." The Corvani spoke to one another wordlessly once more. As they looked back at the men, their crystalline faces seemed less radiant, as though the weight of their knowledge was physically draining them. "There is one possibility," said the left Corvani, "but it requires a sacrifice no species has ever had to make." "What kind of sacrifice?" Zara asked, though she was quite certain of the answer. "A complete, voluntary relinquishing of temporal technology. Not only on the part of your current culture, but on the part of all future human cultures. Your species would have to find some way of imparting to all your future descendants an iron taboo against the manipulation of time, whatever the form." Sarah laughed. "You are asking us to get somehow each and every future human, forever, to voluntarily give up potentially the most powerful tech ever developed. Beyond that," said the other Corvani, "you would have to find some way to frame this prohibition so centrally to human nature as to be unthinkable to transgress, even on impulse." Dr. Chen was already working at his console, doing math. In theory, he could potentially create a genetic change which would make temporal manipulation psychologically impossible to the human race, an abhorrence or inability to even conceive of messing with time on a deep level. But that would mean, Zara halted, the full consequences becoming clear to her. That would mean us using time travel to go back and modify human evolution. We would have to tamper with our own past to make sure we do not tamper with our history. Creating another loop, Commander Thane said gruffly. "No." The Corvane Center cut in. "If you do the transform properly, it could create what we refer to as a terminating sequence. The loop would repeat one more time, but the transformed humans would have no capability to perpetuate it." The group worked through the theoretical model the rest of the day. This could be achieved, Barely. But it would require hitherto unseen cooperation between Corvani and human science. Let alone, it would require the agreement of the current human generation to condemn all future generations to the limitations of technology. There's something else, said Zara, looking over the equations. If we do this, if we succeed in breaking the loop, what happens to us? To our current timeline. The Corvani did not say anything for an incredibly long period of time. Then the middle one opened his mouth. Unknown. You can continue to exist as the final form of the loop, or you can disappear, having served your purpose in history. No way to foretell. The gravity of the decision loomed over the lab like a pall. They were being asked to wager not only their own existences, but to decide with the potential to decide all the humans who would ever live. Commander Thane gazed at his team members. I cannot do this on my own. This involves all of humanity. We can't warn all of humanity, said Sarah. The knowledge itself may cause new temporal instabilities. The more there are who know of the loops, the greater the possibilities are of some individual trying to exploit them. Well, we have the same impossible choice, said Chen. Save the universe and likely annihilate our species, or save our species and likely cause the ruin of reality itself. Zara had been quiet, studying the temporal simulations with increasing fervor. She rose, her eyes sparkling with potential. What if there is a third option? Explain, said the Corvani, as one. We've been thinking about this as if loops themselves are unstable, as if tampering with time must cause disruptions. But what if the very opposite is true? What if loops are actually some universal stabilization? She manipulated the holographic display, presenting the cosmic pattern of temporal contamination differently. What do you see? All the civilizations with temporal contamination signs have accelerated progress, fewer wars, and increased stability. What if the loops aren't contamination? What if they are evolution? The ripples of what she said spread throughout the room. Marcus Chen stepped forward, his scientific interest overcoming his terror. You mean you believe temporal manipulation is a natural stage of cosmic evolution? That there are inevitably advanced civilizations who gain the ability to ensure their own survival? And if that's true, then trying to prevent it isn't preserving the natural order. It's opposing it. One of the Corvani, the one on the right, stepped closer to the screen. You are proposing we acquiesce to the temporal contamination rather than fight against it. I think we can learn to master it, said Zara. Your instabilities aren't a product of the loops themselves. They're a product of mutually uncoordinated temporal manipulation. Humans going back to change one thing, and other humans going back to change another thing, creating patterns of interference. She indicated specific spots on the temporal data. But within the societies with the most solid contaminations, there are indications of coordination. Different species working with each other to manage their temporal interventions. Commander Thane began to grasp where she was taking him. What you are describing is some type of galactic temporal management system. Beyond galactic. Universal. A combined effort on the part of all temporally capable species to sink their historical intrusions, as opposed to one another attempting to predate their own pasts. We work to maximize the past for all. The Corvani considered this in their unspoken way. When they spoke next, their tone had a sense of hopeful caution. Such a system would require extraordinary species cooperation. It would require sharing our most sensitive historical data and coordinating our most timely interventions. But no species would ever have to face temporal extinction, Sarah added. We would not have to give up our future potential, and you would not have to remain entrapped within your intervention loop. Dr. Chen was already outlining the mathematical structure. It's possible, in theory. We'd have to construct a type of temporal constitution, a body of rules to which all species would have to consent when they alter their past. And we'd require enforcement procedures to keep individual imbalances from rising above zero. The enforcement would follow naturally, Zara realized. If all species are pulling their weight to maintain the stability of their own temporal patterns, they'd necessarily oppose any outside intervention which threatened to disrupt that stability. The crystal form of the Corvani Center seemed to brighten up. You are proposing to transform temporal disorder into temporal authority. We are going to grow up, Commander Thane declared, as a galaxy, as a universe. To assume responsibility for our power instead of misusing it or relinquishing it. The following debate continued to run for days. Human scientists and Corvani theorists worked together to construct the foundation of what they had now christened the Temporal Accords. It would be a bold project requiring not only the cooperation of Earth and the Corvani homeworld, but now inevitably all civilizations within the universe, which were temporally advanced. The policy was elegant in its subtlety. They wouldn't try to break the loops of time, but would regularize them. All species would have to maintain their patterns of evolutionary history. But all acts of temporal intervention would be filed with some kind of central authority for coordination. Conflicts between divergent species' temporal interests would be negotiated, and mutually agreed on compromises hammered out so long as all individuals' required historical evolutions were preserved. But as they worked, Zara became mindful of an alarming aspect within the data. The patterns of temporal contamination were not random. They followed predictable paths, as if they had some intelligent guidance behind them, far beyond anything a civilization would have known. "Commander," she said, one evening after they had worked late, "I think there is something missing. Something big." Thane looked up while reading the preliminary accords. "What is this type of something?" Zara cast a fresh analysis on the main screen. The patterns of temporal contamination. They aren't caused only by individual species altering their own timelines. They are being synchronized by something else, something that has been directing the evolution of temporal manipulation on throughout several galaxies for millions of years. The probabilities were phenomenal. If some currently unknown intelligence had been praised to temporal evolution on a universal scale, then all they had ever known about the loops were but half true. "You are saying there is a pre-existing temporal governance system," Chen said. "There may be. And if there is, then our loops, the Corvani interventions, etc., may all form part of some far larger pattern beyond our perception." The Corvani Council became quieter for longer than ever before when they received this new data. When they did loosen their lips, their words carried with them a heaviness of revelation. "We have been distrustful for some time, the Central being admitted. Our observation of your species had caused us to believe your temporal evolution too be directed, but we had assumed self-direction on the part of your future selves. If there proves to be another intelligence, and then the question becomes," came Commander Thane, "are we part of their plans, or are we naively intruding on them?" The answer came sooner than they had thought. As they followed the trail of the coordinating intelligence, their sensors detected a vessel heading their way unlike anything on their databases. It was massive, beautiful, and seemed to live partway outside of normal space-time. "Unknown vessel," announced Commander Thane. "This is the research vessel Meridian. Could you please identify yourselves?" The response came not on their comms, but directly into their minds. The tone was old, long-suffering, and with kindness which had appeared to span centuries. "Greetings, young temporal architects. We are the custodians. We have been waiting for you to find us." The main screen lit up, and on it were entities which could not readily be defined. They seemed to consist of living temporal energy, and their shape constantly morphed to and from past and future iterations of themselves. Zara realized that they were not looking at these entities as they were, but as they would be, had been, and would possibly be, simultaneously. "You are the one harmonizing the patterns of time," she stated. "We are gardeners of causality," replied the custodians. "Each civilization becomes inevitably strong enough to manipulate time. Most of them get themselves blown up in the attempt. Some, like you did, learn the loop pattern of existence. A very few reach the level where they are willing to take responsibility for their gifts of time." Commander Thane took a step forward. "How long have you been observing us?" "We have been watching you long before you came into existence." We helped to create the situation which led to Corvain intervention during your evolution. We have been guiding your species towards this moment of understanding. The shock was intimidating. Not only were Corvani and humans trapped in time loops, but the loops themselves were components within an even larger cycle run by beings who worked outside linear time. Why? Sarah asked. Why subject us to all this suffering and confusion? Because, declared the custodians, understanding must be earned. If we had only told you about the character of temporal reality, you would not have gained the wit to handle it responsibly. You had to discover the loops, grapple with the implications, and choose cooperation over domination. Dr. Chen looked up from his calculations. The temporal instabilities we've been worried about. Do they exist? They are temporary, the custodians confirmed. Any civilization goes through a time of turbulence when they first discover how to deal with time. This outward expansion of temporal contamination is actually the universe learning about itself on a universal level of causality. You are not contaminating reality. You are helping it to grow. Zara felt an enormous sense of relief wash over her. So humanity isn't a threat to universal stability. Humankind is part of universal evolution. Your species' personal flair for temporal manipulation, your capacity to question and cooperate, to not only dominate, makes you as beneficial members to cosmic evolution. The Corvani Council joined the conversation, their crystalline forms looking lighter than they had for months. Are you saying those of our interferings were not mistakes? You came too late, said the custodians. But you did come. You did stabilize human society long enough to achieve temporal awareness without destroying yourselves. Evolution, your own change during the era of would-be rulers to willing co-partners, is of equal value. In weeks to follow, the full scope of the work of the custodians became clear. They were not rulers, not controllers, but mediators. They helped young societies through the dangerous transition from linear to temporal consciousness. They negotiated between species to prevent mutually lethal interference. And they exposed societies to ever-increasing populations of temporally conscious creatures. There are millions of species like us. Commander Thane had once asked during one of their daily meetings with the custodians. Billions, came the answer. And each one contributes something unique to the cosmic community. Your planet's contribution is your inability to conform to preordained destiny, even when confronted. With ostensibly ideal causal loops, you look to learn, to improve, to become something better. And what about Corvani's gift? Zara, discerning analysis and patience. Your capacity to observe and learn before you act. Your species, as a group, complete one another perfectly. The realization that they were part of an enormous cosmic society of civilized and time-conscious beings had been as muck-heart-lifting as humbling. But this, too, raised new questions regarding man's mission within this larger context. What do we do now? Sarah asked. Do we go back to Earth and announce this knowledge? That is your decision to make, declared the custodians. But consider carefully. Knowledge of temporal reality changes those who have it. Are your species ready to undergo that transformation? The question had caused fervent debate among the human crew. They had discovered how much stranger and more wonderful reality was than they had ever imagined. But they had learned, too, that knowledge held great responsibility. Marcus Chen argued for gradual disclosure. We can't throw this on humanity, all at once. It would cause pandemonium, possibly even wars among those who believe and do not believe. Sarah did not concur. Keeping this from them makes us no better than the rulers we feared the custodians would become. Humanity needs an account of their own reality. Zara proposed a middle way. What if we start with the scientific community? Ease them into the ideas. Let the evidence speak for itself. People will adapt as they are primed. Commander Thane listened to both sides and then came to his conclusion. We speak truth, but responsibly. We start with those who are most likely to hear and receive it, and we work outward from there. The Corvani Council agreed to the gradual revelation process. They would work with humanity to slowly introduce time concepts, so each successive generation could build on the understanding of the one before. But as they prepared to return to Earth, Zara stumbled upon one last discovery that changed everything. During one last scan of the temporal data, she saw a pattern that had escaped her notice before. Loops weren't only saving human history, they were perfecting it. "Commander, come see this," she exclaimed, her tone full of enthusiasm. The temporal interventions aren't only saving events, they're upgrading them. With each iteration of the loop, they make incremental changes to minimize suffering, maximize cooperation, and speed positive evolution. The proof could not be refuted. Wars which should have taken decades were shortened. Pandemics which should have killed millions were avoided. Advances scientifically, which should have been achieved over centuries, were achieved over decades. We're not merely maintaining a static loop, she grasped. We're upgrading it. Each loop of human history is better than the one preceding it. The custodians, once presented with this analysis, seemed content. You've uncovered the hidden use of temporal consciousness, not to preserve the past, but to maximize it. All civilizations that reach the capacity to work with time inevitably discover how to do so for optimization, not conservation, but how? Asked Chen. If we are changing the past, wouldn't we create paradoxes? You can't think of time as linear, commented the custodians. Time is multidimensional. As many potential pasts as there are potential futures. You can work with time so you can choose which past reaches the future you wish to have. The concept was revolutionary. Humanity wasn't stuck on a predetermined loop. They were actively choosing and refining their own history, moving towards an ideal timeline to create as much positive outcome as possible for all. That is what the cosmic community does, isn't it? Thane stated. The temporally aware species work together to maximize not only their own histories, but the history of the universe as a whole. Certainly. And that is why young societies like humanity are so valuable. You have new eyes, new minds with innovative ideas about what would produce better outcomes. The universe becomes more diverse and complicated with each species you introduce to the ranks. As the meridian set itself for the journey back to Earth, the human crew thought about how completely their understanding of reality had been transformed. They had set out on their mission, believing they were studying an alien species, coming back as the newest members of an interstellar civilization dedicated to the improvement of life itself. "Do you really think they will listen to us?" Zara asked as Earth grew larger in their view screen. "Some will," answered Zara. "Others will have to become accustomed to the thought. But the evidence is irrefutable. When people do gain awareness of patterns, they will see them everywhere." Commander Thane stood on the observation deck, looking out as their homeworld came into sight. They would, in a short number of months, undertake the challenge of opening up humanity to their star heritage. It would be tricky and potentially dangerous, but it would also be the next step of humanity's evolution. "Custodians told you you had to earn understanding," he said to his team. "I think we've earned it." Behind them came the Corvanier's Urge vessels, their crystal hulls shining with soul's light. Once would-be conquerors of human destiny, now fellow travelers on the biggest adventure a species could possibly imagine. The conscious evolution of reality itself. As they reached Earth orbital space, Zara entered one last comment into her research journal. "We learned today that free will is not an illusion, but the universe's strongest force. We learned the past isn't preordained, but is forever edited for the better by those who are bright enough to do so. Most importantly, we learned humanity is not alone on this big planet, but part of a group determined to make life better for everybody. The loops are not our jail. They are our tools, and we've only just begun to learn to use them." The Earth return announced not an end, but a beginning to humanity's conscious cooperation with the optimization of reality itself. A beginning to all possibilities to be studied, to all outcomes to be refined, and to all choices to be optimized. The loops of time which once had seemed like shackles had turned out to resemble wings. And man had finally been willing to fly.